Ba-ba-ba-ba-bum. Hey, everybody. Come on in here. This is a bonus Periscope. I'm coming to you from my man cave in Northern California. And I wanted to share with you some of the persuasion technique, some of the negotiating technique that's sort of embedded in the story about the president using the inappropriate word. So I want to start by addressing all the people who are later going to say, you apologist, you apologize for everything that the president says. My position is it was just a mistake to use that word in a place where it could be repeated, and that nothing but bad is coming from it. So let me state that it was offensive and it was unproductive, all right? So it wasn't good on any practical level. But there was a whole bunch of persuasion-related stuff happening on, let's say, the canvas here that gets overlooked because you know your attention goes to the shiny object. So I wanted to call some of that out. So the first question is, why did the president use such coarse language? Now, we've seen that he does know how to limit his coarse language to the occasions where it works. So occasionally, once in a while, he's known to throw in a tweet before being president. And we know that he would occasionally say a mild cuss word at a rally, but that's sort of theater, stand-up comedy, and it felt like it worked, all right? So we can see that he knows when to swear, when to curse, and when not to, and that it's a conscious decision about when to turn it on and turn it off. But what about the case of being president of the United States and using that kind of language in a meeting of professionals, other congresspeople, senators? What about that? Is that persuasive, or is that just being a big, stupid, cursing, a-hole? Well, you'll first note, and the historians will be quick to tell you, that cursing seems to be common across presidents of all types and through the ages. So they tend to be cursing monsters. And so I ask you, with all those different personalities, is it completely a coincidence that they tend to curse a lot? And I believe even Jimmy Carter could curse a bit, to many people's surprise. So here's my take on it. This is using the persuasion filter, where you look at the world as though persuasion matters and people don't use facts to make decisions. In the persuasion world, it's pretty well understood that swearing has a few useful purposes. Now, in the context of a negotiation, imagine if the president said this, so he didn't say this, but imagine if he had. Imagine if he'd said, this proposal you're bringing to me, I don't like a certain elements of it, so I can't accept it. Well, that would tell the people who brought him that offer that maybe he doesn't care that much because the way he talked about it was so matter of fact. He was just sort of all business. So that would lead you to the impression, if you're negotiating with him, oh, there's an area that he doesn't have much investment in, so that's a variable I might be able to move my way. Now compare that to you bring the president a proposal that special status should be afforded to certain countries, and then the president looks you in the eye and says, why should we give special status to these shithole countries? Would you ever forget that conversation? Not for the rest of your life. You might forget every other conversation you have with the president and every other conversation you've ever had. But when the president of the United States looks you in the eye and uses the word shithole, the first thing you do is you don't forget it. And the things you don't forget become more impactful on your thinking in a very irrational way. So by using a out-of-the-box, intentionally inappropriate word, it made it unforgettable, and it means it will repeat in people's minds over and over again until the word has lost all of its original meaning and it becomes a part of you. I hate to say this, but shithole, it's become a part of us now. It's forever embedded in the way you see the world, that we've all gone through the same shithole experience. So the first thing you need to know is that by showing that he used this outrageous word, he showed that he had more emotion about this point than you would expect. And if you're in a negotiation and you've got lots of variables that you're moving back and forth, and the president says, well, we could work with that, no on this, and he doesn't seem to have much emotion, those are the ones you think you can push on. But if the president looks you in the eye and uses the word shithole in a sentence, you're not going to forget it, and you're going to know that he has an emotional investment to whatever that point is. And you're going to say to yourself, I could work all day long trying to change his mind on this point, but I think I'll work on the ones he didn't swear about because they don't seem to have an emotional connection. So there's a very useful, practical negotiating reason why you would swear sparingly, but to show that some things mean a lot to you on a sort of emotional level, then those are the things you're unlikely to budge on. All right, so the other thing about swearing is that it's a privilege of the powerful. All right, if you're in a meeting and you've got, let's say, people of different rank, the people at the lowest rank are the ones who are doing the least swearing. The person at the top is almost certainly going to be doing the most if there's any swearing at all, because swearing is a privilege of power. And if you don't have the power, it's one way to signal that you are the powerful one in the room. So one can imagine that all of his life, when he goes in a room of people who are essentially his peers, let's say in the construction industry, that using swearing is sort of a way of establishing rank. In the same way that pacing the room or making yourself large or expanding your arms or taking the best seat at the table are kind of territorial, by swearing, he's showing that territory may define you, but it doesn't define him. In other words, his power or his territory extends to the point where he can say profane things, and maybe you can't in the same setting. So it is a power dominance kind of persuasion play, and in the context of negotiating, it's not a bad move. You could say it's a dick move. That's a separate conversation. You could say it's unethical. You could say those things. But in terms of does it work or not, I think the science would suggest that it does. Now, here's another one that I'm not going to say that that's necessarily what was going on in this situation, but it's a good lesson. So for the benefit of the audience here, let me just speculate that this may be part of why he used that word when he did. Now, there's a principle in persuasion, and I think Robert Cialdini writes about this, that if you share a secret with someone, that person feels like your friend. Let me say it again. If you share a secret with someone, that person automatically defines themselves as your friend. Because otherwise, why would you be sharing that secret? And, apparently the science backs this up. So in the context of these negotiations, he's trying to get, Democrats on his side and trying to cajole people in this room. And so by calling these countries shitholes, he is saying something which I think you would agree with this. He wouldn't want you to repeat in public, right? Now, I know his critics say he just says things and it's just his brainstem firing and there's no cognition about it whatsoever. But a trained persuader would know that sharing a secret, in other words, giving somebody a confidence, putting a trust in them in a small way, makes them feel like your friend. And when they feel like your friend, they're a little bit more biased toward helping you out. So in the context of a negotiation, sharing a secret is actually very powerful persuasion. It puts somebody on your side. Now, the secret, essentially, or the confidence here, is that you're not going to run to somebody and say that I called these countries shitholes. Now, we know that the president would never call them shitholes in a real public forum, but he certainly might do it in a small forum where he is trying to build trust with people. Now, was it a mistake? Yes, because it didn't work out. It got out. Now, let's talk about the context of where this conversation happened. Now, my understanding is that the senators, both Republican and Democrat, had worked out some kind of a compromise that the senators liked, and they were bringing it to the president for his first reaction. Now, keep in mind, and this is important, that the president had famously said that he would sign whatever Congress could bring him. So you'd expect him to act favorably to anything that both sides, or at least some representatives from both sides, said was good. But instead, what he did was he rejected it, just like flat out rejected it, and with some coarse language. Now, was it smart, in the sense of good negotiating, to reject something that was very much what he said he would sign, which is something that the Democrats and the Republicans could agree on? And that's exactly what they brought him. Now, they were only a subset of Republicans and Democrats, but they were, somewhat representative of what might sell to the larger body. So you would expect he'd be more favorable to it, but he turned it down, all right? Now, do you think that Dick Durbin expected him to turn it down? Probably not, because he had said famously that if you can get both sides to agree, I'm in. So you got to figure out that Dick Durbin probably went in that meeting thinking, okay, we're moving ahead here. We got a deal. I'll be one of the names on television that looks like a hero. I'm reaching across the aisle. I'm doing good stuff here. I can't wait till tomorrow when I'm standing in front of the public taking bows for this great bipartisan thing I've done. And then he gets in the room and Trump just says, nah, I reject it. Now, was that a dick thing to do by the president? You could say that. I would not argue that point. Was it illegal? No, it wasn't. Was it his job description to negotiate for the best outcome? Yes, it was. Was it exactly what he promised us when he ran, which is that he would be a hard-ass negotiator and would never settle for anything less than the best deal he could get? Yes, he did. That's exactly what he promised us. Is he doing it in this situation? In other words, do we see him making the right move that would suggest he is trying to get the very best deal as Republicans see it or as he sees it? And the answer is yes, because turning down this first deal that came to him was exactly the right move. And I think you could ask other negotiators to back me up on this. I'm not a professional negotiator, but it seems to me that was exactly the right move, to just turn it down flat and to let them worry a bit more about closing the government or DACA or whatever else. But remember now, he has the ultimate power. He already has in his pocket, thanks to them, a deal that's not terrible. So he has a doable deal in his back pocket that all he has to do is say yes to anytime he wants. So now, once again, remember how I said he always likes to put time on his side? Now all the time is on his side, because he can run it right down to any deadline he wants. And as soon as he's got it down to the deadline, he'll just say, all right, well, best we can do is that deal that you offered in the first place. Pretty close. Let's do it. But I don't think he's going to do that. I think he's going to sweat them out, and they're going to come back with a little bit more. It might not be a lot more, but it's going to be a little bit more. And all he did to get it was say no. That's all he did. Now, did it help that he said no with some inappropriate language that made it clear that he's got a commitment to this no, at least on that one portion of the agreement, that he's not going to change his mind? And I think the swearing conveyed that. Assuming he didn't swear every sentence that entire meeting, people would have, noticed that. Now, you're probably puzzled by a report that two of the participants, two of the senators, are saying that they did not hear the president use the language reported. Now, if that's true, that means that he was saying it to an even smaller, maybe an aside, maybe while other people were on break or something. Maybe he said it to just a few people. And if he did, keep in mind that the context that he was saying it changes how it sounds. All right? There are things you would say to someone you trust that would sound just terrible if you said it in public, which is why we say the things we say in public differently. So when he said what he said to someone he thought he could trust, and he thought would know it was just a shorthand for, he prefers a merit-based system, and this is not heading in the right direction, what they had suggested, then, if it's somebody you trust, you can use your crude language and you can convey just how strongly you feel about it. But as soon as that language is taken out of its native context, which is one to one, or it might have been one to several, but a small, an intimate group in this context, as soon as you take it out of that and put it on TV and run it as a chyron, and then juxtapose the Norway comment, which, by the way, it's not entirely clear that he said the Norway thing at around the same time he said the thing about the shithole countries. It may just be two things that came up, and it would sound a lot different. It would sound a lot different if you heard it live. So it wouldn't surprise me if, when the president says that's not what I said, that might actually be true. But I think he said something close enough to that for all practical purposes, we have the same situation. Somebody says, God, you're dumb. Well, you could call me Scott. I like it when you call me God. I mean, it's respectful. All right. Now, Norway, apparently some Norwegian official has said that Norway declines the offer to immigrate. And a lot of people in the United States were very sad because they thought, what happens if our pipeline of Norwegians starts drying up? And I don't know, how will we get by? So I think that's what I was going to talk about for today. Yeah. So here are the concepts I covered for today. One is that swearing has some utility if used correctly. One is that it conveys emotion and a bit of irrationality, which is good because it tells the person you're negotiating with that this is one of the things you're not going to move on, and they should maybe either talk about some other point or give up. It also demonstrates power, because swearing is a privilege of the powerful, right? The secretary doesn't get to swear in front of the boss, but the boss swears in front of the secretary. And vice, you know what I mean. Then also that sharing a secret makes somebody feel like your friend, but you don't want to share a secret that can really get you killed. You want one that is, not a fatal blow if it gets out, but enough that it would be a little embarrassing if it got out. So that's what he did. He shared something that would be embarrassing if it got out. And I think Dick Durbin went into that meeting thinking he would get a good result that day. But in the end, if the speculators are correct and he's the leak, he decided to bring down the entire country because he had a bad day. So if he was the leaker, then he violated some collegial trust at the very least to talk about what was happening in a meeting in a verbatim way. And then, of course, it was smart for Trump to reject the offer, even though he said he was going to accept a bipartisan offer, because he could, and because he put time on his side, and now he has, he can sweat them out and get a little extra. So negotiating-wise, very good. Where he went wrong is that Dick Durbin got a little, allegedly, we don't know that he was the leak, but people are saying it's the likely source. And if he got angry because he didn't get the result he wanted, he may have violated a trust and decided to leak it and decided to basically throw the country under the bus because it's pretty bad for the country. All right. And, of course, you know that everybody who thought the president was a racist before this, they see this as proof that he is. And everybody who thinks that he keeps talking about countries, but people keep talking about race, say, well, there you go again. He talked about countries, and you talked about race. So nobody really is going to change their mind about this, and we'll probably move on in 48 hours. I'll be on Smirkanish's show on CNN tomorrow morning talking about probably this.